What's going on, guys? Kenny here again, and today I've got another hype versus reality for you. And what that's going to be about today is this guy. As you guys well know if you saw the thumbnail, this is the Spyderco Shaman, and this is the Blade HQ exclusive, but I'll be speaking of the Shaman in general. Yes, this is the Blade HQ exclusive with CPM M4 and JG10 scales, which I dyed green, as you guys can see, obviously. And this is like I think it was an emerald green, and I went a little darker in the back here, and went a little lighter up near the pivot. Came out really nice, guys. I'm really stoked with that. As you guys can see, I also added an MXG deep carry clip, but I carried it with the stock clip for a while, so I'll go ahead and let you know what I thought of that. And then I also modified that nub there, deleted that nub. So yeah, and I also knocked down the jimping a little bit. So I did some modifications to it, but I'm going to speak to it as if it was stock and talk about what I thought of it and why I did the modifications. And then of course, if you guys haven't watched my hype versus reality, the way I do this is I just do the specs and size comparisons first. Then I go into the into the hype, which will be, manufacturer, designer, distributors, the community hype. It could be your own, perception of it. And then, of course, I'll go into the reality and let you guys know what I thought of it. And did it live up to it? Did it live up to the hype? So, yeah, in saying that, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the specs. Go ahead and throw that up on the page right here, up on the screen, And I don't want to waste you guys' time, so I just put up the, specs here, and then I'll go ahead and bring you guys back, and we'll go ahead and do some size comparisons, which I'll start with its brethren, the PM2. You guys can see that's a relatively, pretty much same size knife, You line up the butts. Pretty much the same size. And blade as well. If you have a PM2, you kind of know what the cutting edge and blade length is going to be on the Shaman. Then we got the Para 3, and you guys see what that is. That's right, guys. Probably my newest addition. Little Maximate Para 3 with gray G10 scales. You can see the Shaman's a much larger knife than the Para 3. Just the same as the PM2. Then I'll bring some Benchmades in. We'll go ahead and show you the Super Freak with M4 as well. Similar size knife without a finger choil, so you get more cutting edge. And then the Benchmade 940. Just a slightly smaller knife, but much narrower and thinner in hand for sure, and in pocket as well, subsequently. Then I'll go ahead and bring in a Cold Steel. It's the American Lawman, very similar size knife. And the Chavez Redención Street. It's the Ultramar line. Similar size knife as well. And then just one more, just because I want to show off. Yeah, boys. This is the Shirogorov F95NL. That's a beauty, guys. Yes, he is. All right. Then I'm going to bring in this and wipe the blade down. I want to say thank you. Give a little shout out here to Daddy-O EDC. Thanks a lot, Mason. He sent this my way, and I was really wanting to try one of these Mighty Hanks, and yeah, he hooked it up. That was pretty awesome of him, and I'm really enjoying this, guys. Maybe I'll do a review on this if you guys think that'd be something you'd be interested in. I'll review one of these Mighty Hanks. And moving forward, guys, go right into the hype of this knife, and yeah. So first things first, I want to say most of the stuff I saw about this knife before getting it was positive hype. There was some negative hype, but not a whole lot. And then some of my friends actually, like I guess Gerald at Outpost 76, he doesn't really like this knife at all. And then like Jack Farm Boy, and there's a few other ones that really didn't fit them, and they weren't into it. So it's funny that, you know, finally started to see some negative hype right as I got the knife, because before that it was mostly just a bunch of positive stuff. And one of the positive things that you always hear about is the action. You know, it's a really good example of the compression lock with that heavy blade and everything. It seems to drop pretty free, although on a stock version you will see that nub, and that's one of the negative hype things that I'll be talking about. But yeah, so really the action was one of the hype things, and then also just being like a super beefy knife. As you guys can see, it is a very big knife, and it's got some heft to it, and it definitely is one of those worker type knives. And yeah, that was definitely some of the hype, was that worker mentality with this knife. Also the smooth G10. You know, I heard a lot about how nice it was in hand, and it is also contoured, so that was another thing that was hype, you know. And heard a lot of hype about just how comfortable in hand this knife was, and just really as a worker it being amazing. And it is a good size knife, as far as like being just a good EDC size, probably on the upper end of what you would carry. If you like smaller knives, this is definitely a bigger knife, and with it being over 3-inch blade, it's like 3 5/8. So you're not going to be carrying this if you're in a state where it's like under 3-inch, or a country for that matter, if you're watching this from a different country. But yeah, it's definitely a good size, you know, if you're wanting to get some work done. I like at least having a 3-inch cutting edge when I'm cutting a lot of material. Also, a little heft to the blade and weight sometimes helps. And then also the contoured handle being like, you know, comfortable for long-term use. So, and good height of the handle as well, palm filling and everything. So yeah, that was the hype, you know, that was a lot of what I heard as hype. And then the negative hype was of course, that nub. Yeah, that nub's a big negative hype on this knife. And I definitely, you know, if you guys saw my first impressions, you'll know the nub did bug me, for sure. So going into the reality, guys, the reality when I got this thing out of box, like I said, I mean, I'm going to go into it in the way I always do, which is kind of looking the knife over, almost like the first impressions is how I start the reality, because that is the beginning of the reality, if we're all thinking about it. So, first things first, I really did enjoy the G10. The finish of the G10 is super nice. It's smooth, but there is a bit of texture to it. What that is it's just the G10 weave, giving you a bit of a texture feel. And I actually really enjoy that. Also, the contouring was done very well, and it's very smooth and very nice. Yeah, and then as far as the inside, though, that was a negative thing I saw right away. It was sharp. This inside edge, you probably heard some other reviewers talk about it, but this inside edge was very sharp, to where you could actually like scrape off fingernail by doing that. So that wasn't necessarily ideal, guys. And here too, which really affected the ergonomics, which I'll get into later. But yeah, it's not amazing. Especially these knives, I think they start, let me make sure I see this and don't give you some false information. Yeah, these knives start right around $188, $188.85 or something. So they're definitely not cheap knives, you know. And at about $190, to have it not be like, you know, that edge broken down, it's a little ugly, you know, as far as the finish goes. And then the finish on the blade was done very nicely. It's like a satin. You can see the satin lines here, like the grind lines are there, but then it's kind of like a polished satin, and it's really nice. You can see the flats up here. It plays a nice plays with the light nicely. But all the grind lines are the same direction, so there's no messing with it that way. It's not like you have a vertical lines and then horizontal lines. Horizontal and then vertical, I should say. But yeah, these are all vertical lines, and it's nicely polished. You guys can see I scratched it there. Yeah. I'll let you know what I did, but yeah, it's just a really nice finish on the blade. Although this jimping was extremely sharp on the edges, and on this edge was very sharp. So that was something to note, and something I knocked down. I'll talk about all the mods I did, when I get into each one. That was one of them, though. I wanted to knock this down and also knock the insides of the handle scales down. Yeah. And then, yeah, the finish was done very nicely. And the fit, my example, guys, I know I've heard some different feedback from different guys. My example was pretty amazing as far as that, fit. The fit, like, centering was perfect. This is, they actually set the backspacer back so that you don't even have to worry about lining this up. The backspacer just sits inside a little bit, but then this edge was sharp. So that's a little weird as far as finish goes, but the fit was good. I have no complaints on the fit. The blade has no play, and it had pretty drop-free action and no play, so that was good. Yeah, and moving forward into the action, I've already kind of talked about the action a little bit. Detent's great. The detent is excellent on this example, as you can see. And even if I'm closing it, you guys can see the detent here. Pretty good, sucks it in and everything. So yeah, that was nice. And as far as bringing my mighty hanks, yeah, these have a microfiber on the inside, guys. It's really nice. Yeah, so this does collect fingerprints pretty easily, guys. This kind of mirrored stonewash, this mirrored satin, just so you know. Yeah, and then the action was really nice, though. And I had never seen anyone do this, but the first thing I saw when I saw this jimping and this open front here, I was just like, oh, I think I could front flip that, and that's what I did. Although when I showed that to people, they were like saying like, oh, there's no way, my detent's way too strong to do that. My detent's pretty strong here, guys. I can flip it, but this is a heavy blade. I can get it to fail, like gravity, but I have to go pretty hard. And then, yeah, it's pretty good detent. So the fact that I can do that, yeah, you see it there. I don't know if it's just my detent's dialed to be able to do that. Maybe it's not dialed and that's why I can do it. But yeah, super fun. And just another way to deploy it. Although I do, guys, I'm not like doing like a front flipper where you just kind of push the top over. I'm actually pushing it out. You have to break the detent first, guys. So I think it's more technique than anything, but it's possible. At least with my example. So I really enjoy the action on this, guys. As you can see. Although it is kind of spoiled by that nub when I first got it. You have to time it to where you like move your finger at the last second so that it can drop. Although now I don't really have to do that. Although I still, see how close that is? I still have to move it just a little bit, but it's not nearly like it was, and it's so enjoyable. Oh man, this action's great. So I really, really like that. And then as far as the, I mean, so many ways to deploy this, guys. Like, just all the Spidey ways, except for this one, the front flip. I really don't even need to use wrist. I'm just doing that. Let's see if I can, yeah, no wrist. So really enjoyable action. As far as lefties, I know that I don't really talk about lefties that much. I'm sorry. Southpaw is just as important, guys, but this is how I do it left-handed. I just kind of let it drop to my middle finger, That's how I do it. Although you can do it like this, I just feel like it's kind of unwieldy because it can easily slip out. You're only holding it by that little bit there, but I can do it that way as well. I know I don't really get to that as much as I should. And then I can do it like that. There's so many ways to play with these compression locks, especially when they're this loose. So really enjoyed the action on this guy. And then in use, guys, in use, the part that really matters. I'm gonna go ahead and throw up some footage here of me using the knife. The performance of this blade, for one, the factory edge was done pretty well. It was pretty sharp right out of the box, and I put it straight to work. Although the angle was a little bit obtuse, I definitely wanted to lay it back a little bit, especially with how thick this stock is, and it's not a super aggressive primary grind, which I'm going to get to after I show this footage. But as you guys can see, I did a lot of cutting with this knife. It is M4 steel, and if you guys don't know, I've talked about M4 from Spyderco a lot. They do a really good job with M4. They definitely seem to nail it for the most part, and from what I've seen in testing, it averages probably right around like 63 maybe HRC. I didn't actually do the numbers, but we see a lot of like 62, 63, 64. I think we even saw one 65. So yeah, they do a really good job with their M4, and the grain structure seems to be done very well as well. It's not just a high HRC, but an actual a well finished high HRC. So yeah, I really enjoyed the M4 in that manner, and I also enjoyed cutting with this knife. Although there were some things that really started to wear on me, as far as like the stock thickness was one of them. You are fighting that stock thickness sometimes when you're trying to cut through like thicker materials. So when I had like 2 or 3 thick cardboard, it cut through just fine. When I got into like the 5 or 6, it still cut good once I laid the angle back, but especially with the factory edge, it was struggling. And as the edge starts to degrade and you're starting to, like it's not as keen as when you first sharpen, it does start to fight with that stock thickness. Or I shouldn't say stock thickness, but more so behind the edge thickness. The behind the edge thickness I will show you when we come back, and I'll bring out the calipers, but yeah, it's not amazing. I was definitely not really impressed with the behind the edge thickness, which was a disappointment in a way, and I'll get more into that when I bring you back. But yeah, it's definitely an enjoyable knife to use, although the inside edge of the handle scales definitely started to bother me after some more extensive use. It definitely started to wear on me, and then the excessive, like the sharpness of the jimping started to bother me a little bit, but mostly the sharp edge of the inside of the handle was one of the most bothersome things I noticed about the Ergonomics, which is actually easily fixed. You know, you can always just take like a Spyderco fine rod or just a small piece of sandpaper and knock that inside edge down. It's really not that big of a deal, and it just takes a few minutes, really. So I don't find that to be like a make or break moment on the knife. In the other hand, like people, I understand when you're spending $190, you don't necessarily want to first things first, like have to do modifications to your knife. But I feel like if it's a knife that you really love, it's worth it. I feel like it's worth it to just get the knife and do your own modifications. I feel like that's the way with most production knives. There's always something you want to change. No knife's perfect, you know what I mean? I mean, there might be one out there for you, but I haven't found one yet for me that's perfect. But yeah, there's always maybe a little subtle thing you'd want to change, and if I can do that myself with a modification, then why not? You know, why not do that? So yeah, I really did enjoy cutting with this knife, especially after I modified it. After I knocked those edges down, it was really just such a joy to carry and use, except for the behind the edge thickness. That's the one thing that really started to wear on me, and I noticed that, God, You know, it was the one thing that I just feel like Spyderco kind of dropped the ball on. And I mean, there's a few things honestly with this knife, but in the constant improvement of the, you know, the constant, I forgot him, the and yeah, you know what I'm talking about, guys. Their constant improvement in their models. I hope that they change that. I hope they start to grind this a little heavier, or I mean a little thinner. I know that they try to call it a heavy user, like they think of it like a heavy user, but come on, guys. I just feel like it's M4 and the S90, like it can take it if it was a thinner grind and still be a heavy use knife, and keep the tip thick if you want to, but grind that down a little bit and give it some, you know, slicing capabilities, because this is just really thick. I mean, for most people's everyday use, I don't think they would have too much of an issue, but for me personally, I definitely would like a thinner geometry. And I do a lot of excessive cutting of cardboard, so that's why a lot of times I'd like a thinner behind the edge thickness. So in saying that, I am going to bring you guys back right here and talk more about what I'm saying, because it's kind of hard sometimes when I can't show you what I'm saying. So yeah, as far as this behind the edge thickness, you guys can see by my bevel how much thicker this gets to the tip. And we're going to look at that. Alright, so let's see. Let's zero it out. Okay, so we're zeroed out. This is at, I believe, 16 or 17 degrees per side. About 33% degree inclusive. 25 thousandths, guys. And that's way back here. That's where it's the thinnest, I think. Or maybe it was right here. Let's see. 26. 28. Spyderco must have been talking to ZT on this one. This is like a ZT Spyderco collab or something. I don't know. I'm just making fun here, guys. Yeah, 29 thousandths. And it gets really thick out here, I think. Ooh. 34. So yeah, I mean, I understand they want to keep a thick tip so people can pry and do some stuff with it. Guys, why? I mean, this is what I don't understand. This is what I don't understand. The PM2. You look at the Shaman, it's like, okay, this is like, it's like a beefier PM2, right? Pretty much, you know, just like a thicker stock. Slightly thicker stock. Let me see. Let's see what we got here, guys. 0.145. Pump. Okay. So the same stock thickness. You get the same stock thickness as a PM2. Okay? Same stock thickness. Same amount of cutting edge. And you have all this extra blade out here. It sounded Canadian right there. Out, out, out. You have all this extra blade out here. So why wouldn't you take it to a thinner behind the edge? I would think like you'd want to take this thinner because you have all this extra blade height. You at least here, you could get that thing nice and thin and keep the tip being thick. I mean, I just don't really understand it, guys. I really don't get why they left this so thick. And then, of course, why didn't they knock that inside edge down? I spent maybe 10-15 minutes knocking this down. Maybe 10-15 minutes. And that was with it off the scales. I mean, when I was dyeing them, I hit it before I did it. Probably could have spent like 5 minutes if it was on the knife. I spent about 10 or 15 minutes taking the knife apart and then hitting the edges. Why didn't Spyderco do that? It's a $190 knife, guys. I feel like Spyderco could have just... Dude, it's so easy for them to just knock that edge down. I don't understand why they wouldn't round that inside edge a little bit. Just a little bit, guys. Doesn't take much. You can see that I did it. And it actually, oh, so much more comfortable now, guys. So much more comfortable. And I just don't understand why. And then as far as the ergonomics go, like I was saying, I really enjoyed this after I knocked that edge down. I heard a lot of guys complaining about the compression lock in hammer grip. I don't have an issue, guys. I do notice it after a little while, and to be honest, another thing I would say they need to do in their constant improvement is get rid of that little jimping or whatever you want to call it. It's unnecessary. The Kapara has just a straight bar, and it works just as good. What's that little jimping there for? It's not aggressive, but it definitely is the only thing I noticed like bothering me at all. They could have just rounded this bar, and it would have been much more comfortable. I didn't notice it as much as I've heard a lot of people giving negative feedback on that. It definitely bothers me after a little while, like extensive amount of cutting, but only because of the geometry. If this was ground thinner, I don't think I'd even notice that, because you wouldn't be having to, you wouldn't have that much negative pressure pushing back at you. So I just feel like it's not that big of a deal, but it is a deal. It's something to think about. And that thin spot here can definitely affect that inside palm. If you can see it's even red right there right now. That can affect that webbing right there if you really are pushing hard up against something. But honestly, if they took that jimping off, I think it would be less of a problem. And then when you come up here, I did notice people saying this jimping was aggressive, and yes, it is. It is pretty aggressive, and that's why I knocked that down. So I knocked this down as well with some fine grit sandpaper and a ceramic rod, and it's actually really comfortable now, even in choked up grip. Although in extensive cutting, that's gonna start to wear on you for sure. After a while, I definitely felt it. But ergonomics are pretty good for me, guys, honestly. And in the saber grip, yeah, back here you are kind of far from the blade, but it wasn't really affecting the use for me necessarily when I'm just cutting normal like cardboard and stuff. Although if you were trying to do some fine work, I would definitely be up here probably. And I knocked this jimping down a little too, so it's really comfortable. Although this jimping was slightly sharp as well from the factory. But nothing that I felt was like super bothersome. I really enjoyed the ergonomics of this, guys. The contoured handles minus that inside edge, once I knocked that down, was really comfortable. Really comfortable ergonomics. And yeah, I mean, I can understand why this would bother a lot of people, and I get it, especially like something like this. I could see that becoming really annoying after a while and starting to bug that inside webbing. It didn't bug me that much though, guys. I think I also, when I'm cutting, I do this a lot. When I'm trying to push through heavy cardboard, I kind of put my hand on top and push down through like this, almost like a pinch grip. And that's probably why I didn't notice that too much, because I'm not like in the webbing necessarily pushing down, more like this pushing down. So yeah, that might have been why it didn't bother me that much. And it felt actually really comfortable in the pinch grip. It's actually a very comfortable grip on this knife once you knock down that edge. That is the one big thing that I feel like that's a simple fix from Spyderco. Just knock down that inside edge. And then the nub, guys. The nub is just, it's a blaring issue with this knife. And so many people probably don't buy this knife because of that nub. And to be honest, I don't really understand it, because one knife that I just got to handle and got to review that is pretty much the same shape as this guy's, and it looks like this essentially, is the Brower, the Spyderco Brower, which is a smaller knife that you're always going to carry, always going to be holding like this, and there's no nub. So I don't really understand the nub on this knife. And honestly, on the Brower, there's no issue. Like, it wouldn't even come into effect with the back, because it's it's a frame lock, so you're always just doing it from here. There's all this extra space back here. They could have had a nub, but there's no nub. Why would they do it on this knife? Honestly, a guard. I mean, if you're up here pushing, stabbing, there's no way you're gonna come off of that. It's jimped, it's deep. I'm not gonna slip up onto this. I'm really trying to slip up onto it. It's not gonna happen. And usually if you're stabbing, it's gonna be from back here anyways, and you have even more of a well. And, oh, I didn't talk about this palm swell, but that is very comfortable, guys. And this does, it feels very hand-filling when you're using like extensive cutting. It felt very hand-filling. And it's a good, it's fairly thin, but it because of the height here and height here, it's still really filling in the hand. And I do have a 3 3/4 inch broad palm, a 4-inch tall palm, and from this point to this point is 6 1/4 to 6 1/2. So it really fits my hand nicely. And you guys can see even back here, there's a little spare room there, and up here you got plenty of room. So this is a really good size knife for, you know, guys with bigger hands, or if you just like a larger knife. Yeah, really comfortable for me, guys, once I knock the edge down. You know, I have to keep saying that. And the nub, yeah, useless, guys. I really don't understand the nub, and Spyderco just needs to delete that. I deleted it instead. But yeah, they need to definitely get rid of that. And also the grind. Why is it so thick, guys? And that's where the next part comes in. Oh, actually, I'm going to talk about the carry first. This thing carries very well. And ergonomically and carry-wise, the stock clip works pretty good. I don't have a lot of issue with the stock clip, except for when it's right here, this tip is right here. And on a spoon clip, they do come up much higher. They come up much higher and then come back like that. And I did notice it digging right here slightly in ergonomics. And it bugged me just a little bit, so that's why I was like, let me try an MXG clip. And I did, and I absolutely love this clip, guys. The retention's pretty soft. That's the only thing I would say negative, because it's a, you know, a loop over and it's pretty long. It's pretty soft, but it was enough to keep it in my pocket. And this combined with the smooth G10, it went in and out so beautifully, guys. It was really comfortable going in and out. It carries excellently deep with this deep carry. Although with the regular clip, there's a lot hanging out, but nothing that was super bothersome to me. You had about that much hanging out, and it's a lot to grab and pull out too, so that's another positive aspect of that. Just that little bit of ergonomic thing with it digging into my finger right here is the reason I switched, and I actually really enjoy this clip. Back here, it's pretty comfortable still, and I really do enjoy it, so I left it on. As far as in the pocket as well, we'll see what the weight is. 5.18, so it's kind of heavy too. I know a lot of that has to do with that thick stock, holding a lot of thickness in the stock, and then that beefy blade. And this is full liners, so it's super beefy, guys. Full liners, and they are, you can see it there, they are milled. So they try to lighten it up a little bit, but it's still relatively, you know, beefy and thick and heavy. So at 5.18, I didn't necessarily notice it like, oh, this is too heavy, but it's there. You feel it. Yeah, you're definitely going to feel 5.14. Let me show you one more time. 5.18, yeah, 5.18 ounces. That's definitely significant, and you're going to feel it for sure. It's 5.18 ounces, and that is pretty much what they call for. I think they call for 5.2. Yeah, 5.2 ounces is what they call for. And that's the sprint run versus the regular one. It seemed like all the specs were exactly the same. So nothing here that you wouldn't see in the regular Shaman's video. So yeah. But really enjoy this knife, guys, but not without the the modifications. They definitely added a lot of love to this knife. And this is what's coming next, guys. That's right. That's actually why you see the scratches on the side of the blade, because I was lining it up on the grinder. But This thing's gonna get a regrind. I'm going to make this geometry what it should have came with from the factory. Probably a full flat grind, to be honest. Or I might just keep it this way and just go more aggressive to the apex, to the secondary. But yeah, I am gonna make this thing thinner. And I wanted to do this review before I did anything with the grind, because I feel like I already changed so much. It's hard to do a proper review on something where you change everything. You change the ergonomics, you change the action, at least the joy of the action. So I definitely wanted to keep it fresh in my mind and give you guys the review on the actual knife, which you're going to get out of box. So those are the issues. We all know them. I didn't want to dwell on them too much, but yeah, come on, Spyderco, let's fix these issues. You don't need super aggressive jimping, especially on a knife with all these contours. I actually really enjoy the smooth G10, guys. I've heard people say this is too slippery. I don't know what they're talking about, to be honest. With wet hands, where is this knife going to go? You got a palm swell, you got a super deep well here. Where is it going to go? It's not going to slip. Up here, it's even more locked in. So I think this is actually beautiful. I wish they did this smooth G10 more. It's really nice. And something like this, you don't really need... You got all these contours. If it was a stick, if it was just a straight handle, I would see like, yeah, smooth G10 might be a bad choice. But this is not straight at all. And it's contoured. So it just fits so beautifully, and I don't find any need for roughness here, for any kind of texture. So, and like I said, it does have a slight texture to it, so I really enjoy that. Really did enjoy this knife, and it's staying. It's not going anywhere. And why? And you can see I modified it, so I had already known that. But yeah, and now I'm gonna regrind it, and then it's definitely gonna be mine forever. Well, unless somebody offers me something ridiculous for it because they like what I did to it. But other than that, it's mine, and I do love it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope it brought something new to the table, because there's a lot of reviews out there on this knife. So I didn't want to just ramble on about the same old stuff, but I did want to talk about my modifications and how it made this knife something I could love. So. Thanks for watching, guys. I know this is a long one. They all are, I feel like, at this point. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it brought some value. Have a great day. Thanks for everything.